Here's Brody Brazil.
On Saturday morning, a thread of tweets very much caught my eye. And it's not just because of what these tweets said, although they were interesting and revealing, and yeah, we'll dive into all of them here in just a second, but more importantly, who these tweets came from. As in Steve Yeager, as in Assembly Speaker Steve Yeager of the Nevada State Legislature. Right now, he is very much in the mix of helping to determine the fate of SB 1, which is the Oakland A's request for public funding, $380 million to help them build a new ballpark in Las Vegas and relocate to Southern Nevada. Now, I don't know Mr. Yeager at all. I can see he's a sports fan. I know we're in a similar age range. He's a partner at Vegas Battleborn, which is personal injury lawyers. I think he's got a background in law. Comes from Michigan, has previously talked about being a Tigers fan as he grew up. Also a fitness and outdoor enthusiast. Yes, I'm just reading the Twitter bio. By the way, it also looks like he subscribes to Twitter Blue. He's still got the check mark. But I think there's a lot of things here that, granted, if I just came across him on the street or we were having a beer at a bar, we might strike a conversation. Might be a nice guy. Don't know much more about him other than the last 6 or 7 weeks as I've really been paying attention. But let's dive into this Twitter thread, which he offered us on Saturday morning, which had a lot to say in so many different ways. Compelling, revealing, insightful, thoughtful. It gives us some new perspectives straight from somebody on the inside. Begins with this. With the more recent interest in the Nevada legislature, particularly when it comes to SB 1 relating to the A's, please allow me to provide context related to the 35th special session and the Nevada legislature generally. A thread. That's what all the kids do these days, a thread. So for somebody our age, that's pretty hip. And by the way, this thread contains 23 tweets. I've put together a lot of tweets in my days. I don't know that I've ever put together 23 in a row, but he's got a lot to say. And it's interesting, right, as we dive through this, why he chose to go this route, this platform, this message, the timing of the weekend that everybody was on recess. Here he goes. Per the Nevada Constitution, the Nevada legislature meets every other year for 120 days. That is correct. We just saw the end of their session. We are a citizen legislature, meaning that nearly every legislator has another job. About 75% of Nevada legislators live in Las Vegas, 430 miles from the capital in Carson City. He knows that very precisely, right? He's done that math. He's done that trip back and forth probably more times than he'd like. So he's very specific with the hustle to get back and forth northern to southern Nevada. The drive from Las Vegas to Carson City is 7 hours. The flight from Las Vegas to Reno is about an hour, and then you have to drive about 30 minutes down to Carson City. Air service between Las Vegas and Reno has been atrocious this session, with constant delays and cancellations. It is typical for Las Vegas legislators to travel back and forth for most of the session, but the end of the session always means long nights and weekends. So most folks can't go back the last few weeks. Being away from family and loved ones is difficult, but we serve despite it. And I just want to say, before anything else, I have been preaching that already. Talked about the end of the legislative session, the sprint to the end, the long days and hours, the double headers basically every single day for a couple weeks straight, just to get to the end of 120 days like they did this past Monday. And they would have loved to avoid any special sessions, but they were ordered 2 special sessions by the governor, which he gets into here. But he's painting the picture, right, of the fact that this is not their day job. This is usually their second job. It's also not right around the corner. And they really worked to the extremes, burning both ends of the candle here at the very end to get everything passed through. It is hard to describe what the end of a legislative session is like. They are always busy because certain budget bills have to be passed before others can be considered. But suffice it to say that many of us, including staff, were working 18 to 20-hour days for the last few weeks. And I think that was very apparent. Body language, the way things were said and approached, and I'll give them any excuse they need for those things to come across because, yeah, they were fatigued. This is a session that started in February, They got through a lot. They were under time pressure. They ended, June 5th, midnight, and they literally worked until midnight to close things out. So I totally respect it and understand it. So the certainty of a 120-day session is important because it allows legislators to let their employers know when they'll be back at work, and also to schedule important things like doctor and dentist appointments, as well as, family vacations and the like. I also totally respect that too. I work on a seasonal schedule in a sense that I know when baseball season usually ends. You can kind of predict halfway through if there will be playoffs or not. Same thing with a hockey season. You know when it's over. You know when there's a break. You know when there's a time that you'll actually get to take a breather and rest. You go really hard, and then all of a sudden you expect it to be done, as they did, but it was not done. Their work was not done. As explained here, and by the way, I don't know how many tweets in we are here, but so far, there's nothing abnormal. I think we're all just understanding the position of Mr. Yeager, the background. Again, I've already been on this kind of storyline and angle, and I fully understand it and agree with it, so nothing really new to add here. The governor does not usually call a special session right as a regular session ends unless something critical doesn't pass in the regular session. This year, that happened when Senate Republicans all voted no on a critical bill that had been agreed upon. And he provides a couple links here, all from the Nevada Independent, which, by the way, I've also come to learn in the last 6, 7, 8 weeks is a very reliable publication. They're out front on a lot of things. They cover in detail almost everything. So the Nevada Independent very much referenced here. I can't click on this and show you what it says, but obviously that's an article, further detail explaining his point. I had a chance to speak with the governor a couple hours after the end of the 120-day session, so probably right after midnight on Monday night. He indicated he was going to call a special session. I asked twice what the special session would entail, and he did not mention the A's. Another article on that from the Nevada Independent. And by the way, that is Governor Joe Lombardo depicted right there in the tan suit. I believe that is his right-hand man, essentially, off to the right camera right here of the screen. Just for reference, just so you know who that is. The next day, the governor called a special session to make good on the agreement that had been struck relating to the last remaining budget bill. Backstory on this, 5 total state budget bills. 3 of them had been passed. The 4th passed literally right before the stroke of midnight, Monday night going into Tuesday morning, and there was 1 remaining bill. So this is that last remaining budget bill. Capital infrastructure, I forget exactly. It's been a long week. But it was worth about $1 billion, this bill, and so they had agreed to hammer it out. They did it, I believe he'll explain here, in pretty record time. The 34th special session, which was on Tuesday, ended up being the quickest in state history because everything had been agreed upon beforehand. We took care of our business in just 1 hour and 54 minutes. A lot of people thought, all right, well, maybe that's the end of it. The day after the regular 82nd session adjourned, the Senate Majority Leader and I met with the governor. Contrary to what he had told me the night before, he indicated that he was going to call a second special session related to the A's. Whoa. Maybe it was miscommunication. Maybe there were some changes. I can't fully speculate, but if we're listening to one person's account here, Mr. Yeager obviously was not under the indication or even the assumption that anything regarding the former SB 509, the public funding request by the A's, that he was under the impression that none of that was going to ever come back in a special session. Obviously it did. And by the way, to those who reported this in real time, that it was not coming out, and then that there would be a second session or a special session for this, they got it right. Everybody actually on the reporting side of this and those from the Nevada Independent got this right. So here it is, though, firsthand account from somebody who was actually hands-on with it. We advised him, the governor, that it would be better to have a special session on the A's later in the summer, which would give legislators and staff time to recover from the end of the session and get back to their jobs and families and allow the A's bill to be further refined. Not going to speak for Mr. Yeager here, but twofold. The lawmakers are a bit fatigued. The lawmakers saw the light at the end of the tunnel and they're ready to get out of this tunnel. And on the flip side, mentioning that the A's bill needed some further refinements, alterations, amendments, it lets you know that that session from Memorial Day, 6.5 hours or so, everybody got a taste of what was being presented here. And it seemed to be not close, right? I mean, it's a clear indication that there needed to be some further refinements to the tune of later in the summer. Now, we're here approaching mid-June. Are we talking mid-July, August? A couple months to actually hash things out, hammer things out. So he was under the hope that there would be plenty more time to take care of this. I don't know if that correlates to how far off SB 509 was from a yes vote. I don't want to assume anything, but you can read into it what you want. That's the purpose of this, just reading through it with you. The sudden sense of urgency was surprising because there seemed to be no sense of urgency about this during the regular session. Indeed, the original A's legislation, SB 509, wasn't introduced until May 26th, which was, as I understand it, the final day for new legislation to be introduced. Literally the deadline. I'm pretty sure it came in on that Friday night before Memorial Day at about 8:30 p.m., as late as humanly possible, with just 10 days left in the 120-day session. And just going back in reverse, I mean, think about the announcement originally on the night of April 19th and the land purchase agreement at the first site. All of this was so late breaking. Even then, even at that point, there was more than a month to get these documents submitted. Still didn't happen until the last day. But imagine if that agreement and that site had been announced in February or March or January, right? There would have been so much more time in this process. Instead, acquisition of the first site, let alone the shift to the second and current site at the Tropicana Hotel, all that happened. And then this is submitted, SB 509, on the very last day possible. And then eventually gets heard on a holiday at 4 p.m. We made clear all along that we would need sufficient time to vet any proposal relating to the A's. This is kind of dovetailing off the last tweet that, this is not an easy one. This is a complicated one. This is a big one. And so I'm pretty sure that that article from the Nevada Independent details the story at that time. Although we heard SB 509 in a joint session a few days after it was introduced, that's right, they heard it on Memorial Day, the end of the session sprint did not allow for a thorough vetting. In addition, we made clear that we could not seriously consider it until we had the budget locked in. And that's Nicole Cannizzaro to Mr. Yeager's left right there. She's obviously on the Senate side of things, so you've got two of the leaders of the Assembly and the Senate, and they're in unison that they needed some more time on this. Neither of them wanted to go to a special session at all. By the way, for the record, I said it for the record. Nicole Cannizzaro had a child, I think about 2 weeks ago, and she has been mothering during the sessions, and I give her so much credit. Like, on one hand, you shouldn't have to be doing this. Like, life threw you some pretty incredible curveballs just of the timing of becoming a mom all over again, and also a very critical time of a role that she takes quite seriously. But she's doing it and doing quite well at it. So I think it's fantastic. Like, the way she has shown up, baby in hand for most of the public sessions, crazy, unreal, awesome. So Nicole, if you see this, by the way, very cool. Yeah. So back to Mr. Yeager, and obviously they're very clear that they need some more time. They're running out of time. They had the budget bill to try and work on. This was not a priority for anybody. And then all of a sudden, it's back in a special session. The governor vetoed a critical budget bill on June 1st, just 4 days before the end of the regular session, right? That was the last one, effectively killing further discussion on SB 509 because our number one duty as legislators is to pass a balanced budget for the state. Well, and you have to pass the budget before you can get to, $380 million of public funding in different places. The redo of that budget bill ultimately didn't get signed until the very last night of the regular session. That's the fourth one that we're talking about. A few hours before midnight, which obviously left no time for consideration of SB 509, which we said time and time again would not be a, quote, ram and jam. He's not alleging that anybody was trying to do that. He's saying that they didn't want it to become that, but by saying he didn't want that to become that, the interpretation is that it was kind of being presented that way. They were all under the feeling that they did not want a ram and jam type situation of trying to get SB 509 done because of the regular session deadline and because of the budget bills that were more important. You can see how all of this is coming together here. So let's be clear while we are now in yet another special session to consider SB 1. The original legislation was introduced very late in the regular session, and the governor chose to veto a critical budget bill in the waning days of the regular session. It's pretty clear to all of us, but I mean, here it is from, again, somebody on the inside. This is the reason why we're here, and this is being handled in a relatively unique situation. I mean, look, when the Raiders and their deal got approved, it was also a special session, but it was also not a legislative year, which are odd years. It was 2016. It was an even year. So, of course, they called a special session. They didn't want to wait 5 or 6 more months. This is different. They just finished a regular session. They ran out of time. They didn't get to it, and now they're on to extra innings after all those doubleheaders in a row. Disregarding our advice to wait on calling a special session, the governor called it anyway. I mean, that's pretty straightforward right there. Have to respect that. Normally, special sessions for policy issues are coordinated in terms of scheduling, and there is a general consensus that folks are likely to be supportive of the contemplated legislation. And I've heard that before. I mean, initially, as I started to research Nevada state politics and government and special sessions, we knew, even with 6 weeks left in the regular session, when the A's announced their very first site, mid to late April, one of the questions I wanted to know was, well, if this goes to a special session, right? Like if this is taken up after the 6 weeks, because it could be, it's a done deal. You don't take something up and spend reportedly $250,000 a day to gather everybody. $250,000 a day of taxpayer money. You don't do that in a special session unless you know that it's a done deal, right? And that was generally the answer. And that's what Mr. Yeager here is implying. Normally, special sessions for policy issues coordinated. There's a general consensus that it's likely to be supported, and it's going to pass. But apparently he's saying in this case that similar support is not there. Neither happened here. But because we are all legislators committed to serve, we will and are vetting SB 1 to decide whether it makes sense for Nevada. Despite what some surprisingly thought, this was never going to be a quick, quote, ram and jam session, nor is this juiced in. Juiced in might be referring to, well, all right, we've got a AB1, which was the other day on the first special session, which was passed and taken care of. It was that final state budget item. That went through just like that. Now, I don't think the governor has still signed it yet. I don't think. But it's a corresponding thing like, all right, if you guys, I'll sign this budget if you guys pass SB 1. I'll sign AB 1. I'm the governor. I'll sign that if you guys take care of SB 1. We'll agree to, we'll both get what we want out of this if we approve both of these things. But Mr. Yeager here is saying SB 1, the stadium bill, by the way, it's not stadium bill, it's Senate bill. I know it seems like that. It's not juiced in. Like this does not correlate to AB 1, which was voted on and passed and sent to the governor's desk. He's implying that they're not related, but it's also not going to get rammed and jammed in. And rather than continue to burn legislators and staff out, we decided to give everybody the weekend to rest and reset. That doesn't mean conversations have ceased happening. It just means we aren't requiring everyone to be in the legislative building in Carson City. And so that, in reverse, is what I was saying all along. You look at the A's side of things, they needed some more amendments. I mean, it sounds like on Thursday, when there was no real official meeting, it was supposed to start at 11 something, 11:30 in the morning, 12:30, 1:30, 2:30. Finally at 4:30 or so, they said, you know what? We're in session and we're on recess until Monday at 11. Clearly, the amendments that were made from Wednesday to Thursday were not enough. Both sides probably just said, you know what? We both need the rest, and especially the lawmakers. They've been at this for a very long time. They were expected to already be out. Totally understandable. And so in reverse, what we thought turns out to be, what Mr. Yeager is confirming here. We will be back on Monday to continue this process and thoughtfully consider whether SB 1 is in the best interest of Nevada. We realize there are strong opinions on this topic, but we, as legislators, are trying to do the right thing here despite all the noise. And you know what? I don't know what situations, life experiences Mr. Yeager has ever been in, but obviously there's a lot of moving parts to this. When he says the noise, is it the media coverage? Is he hearing from the public? Is he hearing from people in California or his own constituents? Is this just getting a lot of coverage? Maybe this is one of the biggest things he's been a part of in terms of conversation and controversy. I don't know. Oh, one last thing. I think we're at tweet number 23 here. If you're going to come at me with the quote, "We will vote you out if you pass this," end quote, please save yourself the time if you don't live in Nevada or if you don't live in my district. Fewer than a dozen of my 75,000 actual constituents have weighed in on this issue. Okay, this is the 23rd and final tweet, and quite honestly, this one might have the most to it. He's hearing a lot. Maybe that goes back to the noise that he was hearing. He might be hearing from a lot of people in Oakland, in the Bay Area, in California that have a vested interest in not losing the Oakland A's and trying to influence the decision-making in the state capital of Carson City. So he's obviously hearing that. He's hearing some of the pressure that the public opinion on this. I have not seen any poll that shows a strong public opinion favoring SB 509, which turned into SB 1. I've just not seen it. If anybody's got it, I'll take a look at it. Where did it come from? How accurate is it? The only things I've seen, both done by the government and done by private entities, all show opposition. But the second part of this is the final sentence here. Fewer than a dozen of my 75,000 actual constituents have weighed in on this issue. That's a little bit surprising, concerning, but maybe it's not. I mean, maybe this proves that if he doesn't have people from his own district knocking down his door, telling him to, hey, do this, absolutely do this, or don't do this, is that a good thing for the project? It hasn't even caught anybody's attention or motivation to say, yes, we love it, or even no, we absolutely don't love it. It seems like there's just not a demand for this to even happen. There's a lot of things to potentially take away from that. I'm not going to lie. And maybe you've got some other thoughts on this. Mine is that the lack of interest is literally the lack of interest. And if people are supportive of something, they'll usually let you know about it. I guess if they also really, really hate it, they'll let you know about it too. But that sure is interesting, and it might also prove the fact that the A's are really trying to get to Las Vegas more than Las Vegans actually are really trying to get the Oakland A's to come down there. So that's just, again, my interpretation of this. 23 total tweets. Give you credit, Steve Yeager, man. That is a heck of a thread. I think I just spent 25 minutes talking about it, but we had to break it down. So anyway, thought that was interesting. Thought I'd pass it along. Let me know what you think in the comment section down below. You made it here to the end of a video breaking down 23 tweets. For that, give yourself and me thumbs up down below. And also don't forget, subscribe to this channel so that I can definitely see you next time.